Good evening. So happy to have all of you here. And as you know, today's webinar is on the American versus the Indian education system. The goal of this webinar is for us to outline, is for us to compare the two education systems. We're going to be doing this through, our own personal experiences. Since Dikshita, have studied in the Indian education system, and Michael in the American one. So we're going to be talking about how we navigated life from school to college, studying in these two different countries. What were some of the challenges we faced? What really led to our personal growth in this entire process? We would love for everybody on this call to ask questions at any point. We want this to be more of a discussion, and we would love to, get more insights. And if anybody wants to share their own experiences, they're more than welcome to do so. So let's begin. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, wonderful. Hi, everyone. I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Michael Kim. I grew up in San Jose, California in the United States. I went to high school there. My high school was named Bellarmine. It was an all-boys private Jesuit school, and I really loved that experience. And then I studied at Stanford, majoring in English and minoring in computer science, and I graduated in 2017.
Right. And a little bit about myself. So, as you know, I'm Dikshita. I was born and brought up in Ghaziabad, which is a town near Delhi. I studied there till about class 5, and then I moved to boarding school in Dehradun, Welham Girls School. It's an all-girls boarding school, which has been here for about 60 years now. So life at Welham taught me a lot, also because it was a boarding experience. I really made lifelong bonds over there. And it also prepared me for the next chapter of my life, which was in LSR. I studied in LSR for 3 years, doing my bachelor's in history honors with a minor in journalism.
All right. So we're going to go through several different aspects of college life, and we're going to do a little bit of side-by-side comparison. I do want to start by saying, I'm going to share from my own personal experience and perspective on the philosophy as a whole of the education system. So I want to start by talking about the strength of academic program. Stanford was a really wonderful place for me, especially to study when I arrived at school or at college. Undergrad is traditionally 4 years in the American system. And I think that extra year, from what I understand, that is an economics major, but I never ended up taking an econ class, actually. And I had 2 years to explore a lot of different areas, ultimately landing on English literature and minoring in computer science. So one thing that I really loved about the American system is that generally the different departments are not so segregated that you cannot take classes across departments. Of course, this depends on your specific institution, but that was one thing that was really great for my personal exploration. Classes were relatively small, so the average class size at Stanford was around 20 people per class, and the student-faculty ratio is 5 to 1 on average. And then the last thing I wanted to share was the general education requirements. So most American universities will have a general set of requirements that they require all students, whether you're studying, biology or chemistry or English, you had to take the same general requirements. And Stanford's requirements really emphasized breadth of understanding and approaching the world in a lot of different ways. So I think that program, that curriculum really gave me a wider understanding of who I wanted to be as an academic. And that helped me down the line as I decided.
Right. So based on that, I think the Indian education system was quite different as I experienced it. So I'll talk more generally about Delhi University and not specifically LSR, because the Delhi University covers most of the sort of college population that we have in India. So DU offers a wide variety of majors to students, which ranges from, popular choices like political science, psychology, history, economics, to even sort of some unconventional majors such as vocational studies, Hindi, Sanskrit, chemistry, physics, even computer science. The average class size is about, it's about 50, and the student to faculty ratio in undergrad courses ranges from 20:1, and in most postgrad courses from 10:1. My curriculum was definitely a challenging one as compared to what I had experienced in school. In school, I was part of the CBSE board, the ICSE board, I'm sorry, and the sort of the analytical and research skills that were really required for us to, inculcate in a specifically in a stream like humanities, as I was a history student. So that definitely challenged me in college a lot. I also really enjoyed the variety of topics we could choose in terms of our majors. And within, like, as my major was history, I had that sort of liberty to be able to choose which period of history I'd like to study each year. I would have appreciated a little bit more options in that sense, but then we could choose between Japanese history versus Chinese history, or American history, or gender and sexuality studies as well. So there were certain requirements for each and every major that we could opt for, but all majors had specific sort of criteria that students had to meet to be able to opt for these. We also had the option of taking general electives, as they're called in DU. So that's why my elective, or minor as the American system would call it, was journalism. I studied that for the first and second year of college, and that really added more diversity to my curriculum, because I was studying history and journalism on the other end. I also did a little bit of filmmaking within journalism. So that was definitely something I hadn't experienced before, and I got to do in college.
All right. I think the next section we're going to talk about is community building and sort of emphasis on community in the college environment. This is a picture of me in front of what was a fraternity that I was a part of with some of my closest friends from that group. But yeah, I think in the American college experience, so much of what you're learning is not in the classroom, right? There was a deep emphasis on joining and being a part of different communities in the college environment. And that was a wonderful way for us to learn more than just the book smarts, right? I think that was a really important thing for me, particularly. I wanted to tell you a bit about some of the communities that I joined and what they meant to me. One of them was during my freshman year, I was part of a work study program, which meant that as a part of my financial aid, I was incentivized to work in a campus job to help pay for my education. And I worked at the Center for Latin American Studies, which was one of the academic departments. But even though it housed like the professors and the classes and the community, it really emphasized the broader experience of studying Latin American studies. So the example that I'll give here is, I applied for and received a grant to go study in Peru for the summer and complete an internship at that time. So that was a great opportunity for me to be a part of a group of scholars that were all caring about the same issue. And then through that program, I got to experience another part of the world. And that was really nice. And I feel like I learned so much more about that through that experience, about speaking Spanish in Latin America than I could have inside of a classroom. Another group that I wanted to talk about was I was part of an interfaith fellowship that was run through the Office of Religious Studies. So, one thing that I will emphasize is American colleges really tend to have communities for every kind of interest, whether that's religion, culture, maybe it's artistic endeavor. But through this interfaith group, I got to meet with other students who had different faith backgrounds, and faith is really important to me. So it was a really great chance for me to engage with other students about that. And as much as I loved my classes and my coursework, I think when I think back to my memories of college, the community memories were much more salient and have become a part of who I am now.
Right, that's great to hear, Michael. So for me in LSR, I think the space where I really saw communities thrive was in clubs and societies. So most institutions in India, including the Delhi University, they have a lot of clubs for extracurricular activities such as debating, drama, and of course, all performing arts, and even things like, craft and art. So this is where, students from different majors and sort of different years, in fact, because all, from first year to third year, they would all sort of come together and participate in competitions, etc. I would say, though, that in LSR, at least, it was quite competitive to, get involved in a particular society. And there were auditions in place. I remember the first time when I joined college, in my first year, I was actually quite a good debater in school, and I thought that I could also do the same thing in college, but in fact I actually got rejected from the debating society of LSR. So definitely everybody there was very competitive, but that did sort of encourage others to always do better. and they participated in a lot of competitions, etc. And a lot of community life was based on these societies. I don't think people interacted as much within their class groups because the curriculum was also so challenging that you didn't really get a chance to sort of do a lot of group studies, etc. It was a lot to do with your own sort of workload and making sure that we're submitting our assignments in time. So it was through these clubs and societies that people got a chance to really interact with others and make sure that they're doing something just outside their academic development. And because these clubs and societies ended up being so competitive, not a lot of students got the chance to take part in them. So I think I would really encourage everybody studying in the Indian education system to really get more involved in clubs and societies and make sure that you're making the most of your college and education experience. So I think next we're going to be talking about residential life. Michael, why don't you tell us about how your experience was?
Yeah, I would love to share about residential life in American colleges. I think Stanford is actually particularly unique in that all students live on university facilitated housing for all 4 years of your undergrad career. That's actually not normally the case in other places, but at least freshman year, my understanding is that almost every American college will have a freshman dorm system. And I think the main reason why we emphasize freshman year is that it's your first year there. So we want to provide as much structure as possible to get you integrated into the college environment and community. So here, this photo is of a freshman dorm that I was an RA for my junior year. And the term RA, residential assistant, is the name of a role that is completed by an upperclassman who lives with freshmen and gives them over the course of the year the kind of guidance, mentorship, and care that the school wanted to bring to new students. So actually at Stanford in the freshman dorms, there is an adjacent cottage that is lived in by someone who is a residential fellow. So in my role as an RA, I worked with a team of upperclassmen and these two professors in the Stanford Law School who lived and breathed this community called Otero. And not only did we have our students our year, we had students from past years who would come and be involved. And we had people on our staff who had lived in Otero when they were freshmen. And the sense of continuous community there was such a wonderful way to welcome freshmen into the environment. And then in your older years, we had different types of housing, whether that you wanted to live in an apartment with your friends, you could do that. I lived in a fraternity house, which was also a chance for me to be a part of an engaged residential community. And I think through that, I learned a lot of lessons in leadership and in communication and living with people from very different backgrounds and managing my own life for the first time leaving home. And I think that residential education is such a big part of American college life. Highly recommended for everyone. Yeah.
That's great to hear. I think I had my experience of living in of a residential sort of life in school itself, because I was in boarding school for 8 years. So I learned a lot of skills, and definitely because that was that sort of growth period for me, because I spent my formative years there. I definitely, I always tell people that, the kind of person I am today, I definitely gained that through the experience. In college, residential life, usually in most Indian institutions, is pretty limited. One, also because it ends up being a sort of infrastructural cost on the institution. And if we are trying to provide that sort of, affordable education to students in India, then it's not always possible to be able to, provide such facilities. So in fact, in LSR, the hostel facilities were based on merit. So firstly, only those people who weren't living within, I think, a 50-kilometer radius of the institution could apply for the hostel facilities. And they were based on merit in terms of, your scores, and every year you had to maintain a certain GPA to continue again having access to the hostel facilities. But I would say that I never lived in the LSR hostel because my parents sort of live in Delhi NCR itself. But we definitely, I always, interacted with a lot of people living there, and they had an entire community of their own. They had these, activities that they would do. They had a mess, and they would have their own sort of separate farewell from the one that the college was doing. So I'm sure that their experience would have been very different. But I do want to mention that I think the provision of residential life in India is more for the convenience of students rather than, to actually be able to build a community, simply because of the sort of some infrastructural, gaps that we have. But I think I would want everybody to be able to experience a residential life either in school or in college. It's very, very important to be able to gain that kind of independence and, live on your own for at least some years of your life before you start moving to the more professional sort of stage in our journey. I think there's a question in the chat. Would love to take that now.
All right. I think the question is how important was residential life for your personal growth, and what were some of your tangible learnings from it?
Michael, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. Residential life was a huge part of my personal growth. And I wanted to emphasize here actually that in America, in the American education system, the assumption is that freshman year, you will move into a dorm. So I lived actually relatively close to Stanford's campus. My family was maybe 40-minute drive away, but it was not an option for me to live at home and attend school. The school expected me to be in the space. My freshman year roommate was a lovely man named Mauricio, who was from Colombia in South America. And so even from the first day, we had so much to talk about, and I had so much to learn about what life was like in Colombia. And the Stanford process, they would put two random roommates together that had a lot of similarities, but also a lot of key differences. So I think it was a really lovely way to build a relationship with a stranger who I had shared a room with. And at the same time to feel like he was, contributing to my college experience as I was contributing to his. He was a very mechanical engineering, very different student than I was, but I loved getting to see the things that he was doing. And through him, or through one another, I think we would learn a lot about things that were available on campus just by sharing information. And then I think in terms of my other tangible learnings, my freshman dorm had a theme. A lot of dorms at Stanford had themes. Our theme was Casa Zapata, and the theme was Latin American life. So we would have monthly presentations by students and faculty from across campus who would come and talk about their experiences in Latin America, the different political happenings in Latin America or in Brazil. And so that was a really great opportunity for us to learn within our residential world. And then the last thing I'll share is that, every freshman dorm would do certain activities together. And one of my favorite ones, it was called Crossing the Line. And so they would give people a chance to share a lot of different things about their identities, especially, some really difficult or personal parts of their life. These are things that we would share with each other in the first, month of living together. So I got to feel like these people trusted me with their deepest personal lives. And I think that sense of community came from that. So yeah, I really loved the educational system or the educational learnings that I got from residential life, which had nothing to do with my coursework, nothing to do with academics.
That's great. That's very interesting. I can talk a little bit about my experience in school, since that's where I experienced residential life. One of the tangible learnings was definitely just being able to live on your own, not needing that sort of support of a family member at all points. Because what I realized was that, when I actually entered college, there was a significant difference between, my personality and that of people who never lived away from home. I definitely adjusted better to, living in college, because for a lot of people, it was the first time living away from their parents. And I'd basically grown up without living with my parents for the entire duration. So, people in school became family, because you would actually end up sharing more of your ups and downs and your journey with them, as opposed to your parents who you meet, let's say, once a month or even lesser than that. Then definitely all sort of opportunities in terms of, thriving, even things like extracurriculars were all in school itself. So that definitely made all of us, gel more and be able to sort of support each other through tough times. So that's definitely something I learned, to be able to, give to others what they've given to me, and just be supportive of everyone, and really understand that everybody comes from very different backgrounds, very different circumstances, and everybody has a different way of dealing with them. So that definitely transformed me as a person, made me more empathetic, and also more mature in a sense, as my parents actually observe now. So yeah, I think that's about residential life. Moving to diversity, Michael.
All right. We wanted to talk about diversity and the emphasis on diversity in the different education systems. Obviously, it's a very hot topic nowadays. Like, how does an organization affirm and tolerate, affirm and encourage the kind of diversity that we have in our populaces? I think Stanford had a really deep emphasis on celebrating just difference in general. So the example that I'll give here is, for me as a Korean American individual, I was actually really excited to get to college and have an opportunity to explore my personal heritage because I didn't grow up in Korea. I was a part of the Korean Students Association, which was a really wonderful place for me to do that exploration. And there were students there who, for example, were not Korean at all and just interested in Korean culture. There were students who had grown up in Korea who were international students, and they were able to share a lot with me about the current modern culture of Korea. Yeah, and that was a wonderful way for me to explore that. I mentioned my interfaith group, so there were a lot of opportunities for people to come together in groups specifically focused on difference, right? We were there because we all had very different faith backgrounds, and yet the environment was one of community and closeness, and that fostered a sense of, a bigger understanding of the world, I think, than just the lens that I had grown up with. And then, yeah, I don't know. My friends came from all over the United States, all over the world. One of my close friends in my fraternity and we went on a road trip throughout the entire continental United States. So maybe through like 25 different states, covering maybe like 7,000 kilometers of distance. And we almost every night we slept in one of our college friends' houses. So because the Stanford student body is made up of people from all over the United States, we almost never had to like pay for a hotel. We were always just staying at our friends' houses in different cities all across the map. So getting to experience the different, upbringings of these individuals through living together in residential life, to being in clubs together and classes together. Diversity was just a huge part of my educational life. And I think most American colleges now are really focused on bringing that to their campuses. Yeah.
Right, that's amazing. So most Indian universities and colleges, either public or private, have the provision of a quota that encourages students from less privileged and diverse backgrounds to receive the education that they deserve. This actually, this provision also allowed me to interact with those from minority communities in India and understand the challenges that were faced by them throughout life. I feel like because I was in school and I was somewhat living in that bubble where I would pretty much interact with people from similar backgrounds as mine. But in college, I really got a chance to understand how people come from different circumstances and what is it that could be so challenging for them that I hadn't even thought of. So I do want to mention that I do feel that this provision hasn't been well instituted all across the country, but definitely the more leading institutions in India and within DU are respecting it and making sure that people from all communities have that chance to receive the education that they deserve, even if they're not necessarily able to afford it. So I definitely think that LSR was filled with so many diverse people who were bringing all their diverse ideas and creativity into everything that was done. We had our annual festival, which was called Tarang. It was quite popular and it was filled with, like there would be multiple events. It was a 3-day thing. We would invite people from other colleges as well. There were performances and it was a very cultural sort of, amalgamation of everything that the university that LSR had to offer. So that's really somewhere our diversity was showcased, and it was something that the entire college would take part in, and everybody's efforts would really come to light for those 3 days. So I think that was very interesting for me. And I really did enjoy interacting with people from, all kinds of backgrounds, not just within India, but even across the globe. So that was interesting.
All right. Now we'll talk about networking and professional prospects. Yeah, I think this is actually a great thing that comes out of what I was talking about earlier, right? There's residential life, there was a strong academic and non-academic parts of the Stanford campus. Yeah, a more meaningful alumni network from Stanford. I never crossed paths with them. I never was on campus at the same time as them, right? But in a conversation, we could talk about the different community, or in my fraternity. That creates a sense of connection. Or maybe they lived in the same freshman dorm, which has been there for many years. I've found that, not only is the alumni network strongly supported by the university, but there's also a lot of little institutional nuggets that allow me to connect with someone who went to Stanford. So that's been a really wonderful thing now that I'm a professional out in the working world. I wanted to share that, when I was in school, I was a part of a group called the Stanford Alumni Council, or the Student Alumni Council. And this group's whole purpose was to bring alumni and current students together. And there was a lot of synergy there because alumni were curious and they wanted to know, like, what's happening on campus? What are current students like? And students wanted to know, what are alumni doing and how can I get involved in what they're working on? So the story I'll tell is we organized a lot of different events. One of these events was called Junior Dinner Off the Farm, where a group of juniors would go to dinner at someone's house, an alum's house who lived nearby. So through the dinner that I attended, my friend Connor ended up getting a job at the startup that was founded by the person who was hosting that dinner. So that's just like one small example, but there were a lot of opportunities to network. And the last thing I wanted to say was job fairs were a big part of how the university encouraged both companies to come and market their jobs to Stanford students, but also for Stanford students to learn about what jobs are out there on the market. I took this computer science class, CS 107, which is known as like the Weeder class. If you make it through CS 107, you're likely to be able to finish your computer science major or minor. So after the final exam, right outside the exam room, there's a huge career fair and all the tech companies come. And if you think you scored well on the final, then you go and interact. And if you think you failed, then you go home. But yeah, just that kind of like in your face, here are these opportunities, and these companies are like dying to work with you. That was a really great part of the professional prospects. That's cool.
Wow, that's really interesting, Michael. So even in DU, we had a lot of opportunities for on-campus placements throughout college, mostly for second and third year students. They would sort of do a few workshops before the placements would begin on, how is it that you can work on your resume and how can you sort of approach companies when they come to college for these placements. All these placements, I remember, had very sort of like, critical rounds, and there were several rounds that everybody had to go through to actually secure a placement after college. It was something very competitive, and of course, for the number of students there, the opportunities were less. Not everybody would, could say that, okay, I'm definitely going to get a job through this placement opportunity. So we also had to always keep an eye out for other things that college wasn't offering us, but, just through LinkedIn or Internshala or any of these websites, and be a little active there if we wanted to secure summer internships, etc. It was very important, I think, for everybody to stay connected with whatever's happening around the world. Sometimes college would conduct these sessions at the India International Center, which is on Lodhi Road in Delhi, where people from say some diplomats from different countries would come and speak about sustainable development goals, etc. So students like me who more interested in history or the public policy side of things would go and attend these, and then interact with members from these diplomats from different countries about what's going on there and how is it that we can increase our knowledge about these ongoing developments. So that was definitely interesting. But I do feel that opportunities for specifically students like who are studying subjects like history were lesser, simply because it wasn't considered as such a professional degree at that point of time. So, students who were coming from a math or economics background definitely got placed more easily at companies like even Google. Google takes candidates from LSR almost every year, and that's been a record for them. So that was definitely good. I was also the history department representative for our college's placement cell. So that, my responsibilities were to encourage students from the history department to keep applying for these opportunities, and also bring in opportunities through my own network, be it my school's alumni association, or even just like my personal contacts who would be interested in taking interns from our department. So every department had their own representative who would bring in these opportunities and coordinate the logistics of sort of setting somebody up for an internship or job.
All right. Last but not least, we wanted to talk about personal growth. Yeah, I mean, I think for most people who go to college, I think in all parts of the world, I would guess that, the time between ages 18 to 22 or so is such a crucial time. It is the transition point between childhood and adulthood. And I do think that the many aspects that I've already talked about in the American education system really contributed to that personal growth. It was clear to me that the goal was actually not for me to finish a major and have like some sort of academic professional capacity. Like, yes, that was one of the sub goals of going to college, but it never felt like that was the primary objective actually of my time in college. It felt like that was a key piece in a much larger goal of making me feel like I knew myself, right? Like that I had a sense of who I wanted to be, where I wanted to go, and that I had the skills to do those things that would get me to the places that I wanted to be at. And so even now, I feel like the way I engage with communities, or the way I try to learn something for myself that I need to learn for a specific job or for a specific desire or hobby that I have, all of these sort of life skills I think I picked up during my time, whether that was in the residential life, whether that was in a club, or whether it was in a classroom. I think these were all the different things that we were managing at the time. And yeah, maybe one thing for me to think about, or that I've been thinking about in personal growth, is that yeah, just being challenged in a supportive environment by, for example, being around an extremely diverse populace. That made me question a lot of my thoughts and assumptions about the world. There were times where I took classes that were really difficult, and I had never really struggled that hard in academic life. So I think, to sum it up, American college experience really emphasizes being challenged, but also providing that supportive environment. So, failure, I think, is a big part of college life, but only because failure is a great way for you to grow personally. And working through that failure is a big part of what the system can provide you support for. So maybe that's being able to talk to your RA when you're struggling with a class, or maybe that's being able to lean on people who come from your same cultural background when you're trying to figure out, like, what does it mean for me to be an Indian or a Korean or an American? And in all of these situations, I think people find great personal growth in the American college education experience.
Great. So for me, I think in terms of personal development in specific, my experience in the Indian education system, combining school as well as college, was definitely a liberating one. I really, really enjoyed how challenging the curriculum was, and how I was sort of in charge of what I wanted to study and how. Like, I liked having that sort of option of, being able to divide what I'm studying, and across years, and choosing what is it that interests me more to really go deep into what I'm doing. I feel like I focused a lot on my academics during college. I didn't partake in a lot of extracurriculars during that time. I was really, really immersed in history because I was really enjoying that experience, and that was just something I wanted to go into. So I never, at no point did I feel restricted to sort of, with the kind of curriculum that we had. The LSR library was quite famous in terms of, you go there, issue books, and just sit there and spend a lot of time. There were these narrow alleys in the library. It was a really old sort of institution, but it was definitely fun to, be in that kind of space and be able to really immerse yourself in something you've been wanting to learn more about. One thing I would say is that in terms of personal growth, I think I would have liked having, a more formalized system of a mentor or a guide for me to be able to interact with about, my career goals and my aspirations and what exactly I want to pursue post college. A lot of those decisions I made on my own with my family or friends, but maybe having somebody in college would have really made students also more, just aware of what's out there and how is it that they should approach the next chapter of life. That I think that instills more confidence in you when you're graduating from college, because it's a scary time, right? Like, and you don't know what exactly you will be doing next. So but apart from that, I think my experience was very enriching, and I definitely enjoyed interacting with everybody that I did, and everybody I met in school and college added something to my life that I'll always take with me as long as I live. Right.
All right. So we wanted to end with some personal takeaways. Um, yeah, I think for me, one of my main takeaways is that the flexibility, the emphasis on flexibility and breadth in the American education system is something that I'm realizing is different. At the time, I didn't have anywhere else to compare it to, but the fact that we had all these general education requirements that as an English major, I was taking classes in, I don't know, statistics or in the sciences, like these were all ways that stretched my understanding of the world and the way that I thought. Even the fact that I didn't have to choose my major until my third year of college, I think these are great examples of how I was like taught to think creatively, I think, and to make a lot of synthesis or make a lot of my own choices. I think that's built into the American education system, and particularly, for example, in the world of tech or in the world of like entrepreneurial life, I can see how that focus in the education system breeds or creates an emphasis on creating something new for the world, as opposed to doing something really well that the world already does. And then also I've been in India now for the last 5 months, and seeing the strengths of the different systems, I'm realizing that I think someone who comes from this environment and studies in America actually has even more to gain than someone like me who grew up in the American education system. I think that coming from the sort of emphasis here in India and going to also accept and synthesize the emphasis in the American system, I think could lead to really wonderful understanding of not only the world, but like yourself and how you want to show up in your future professional life. I really think that overlap of experience would be a really cool place to be. Hopefully that's something that some of you are thinking about.
Right. I think for me, my personal takeaway would be that, everything that I experienced in college or didn't experience in college would, if I was more of an introvert then, so I feel like a lot of opportunities, I really had to make an effort to, go to them. But for somebody who's an extrovert, they would definitely thrive more in the system, because they would actually make that sort of effort to, participate in things and audition for societies even after getting rejected. But one thing I feel like, could have been emphasized a little more is that these opportunities were always open for everyone. So even somebody who's not very comfortable and who is still in their shell, because, they might have been, a little more introverted through school life. I feel like in college, trying to be able to, for opportunities to come to you, that will really, like, lead to your own personal development and make sure that you're thriving in that space. So I really definitely enjoyed my years in LSR and in school, of course. But I do think that there is still so much more to see in this world, and given that those are the major periods of where we're really being educated, because most of us, move on to our professional lives after that. Having just more sort of inputs from other people and diversity in that sense would make this experience a much more enriching one. So we'd love to open the floor for some questions, or any sort of insights or any inputs, any personal experiences anybody on the call would like to share. Please feel free to do so.
you guys were pretty, you kind of covered most of the areas I felt that people had concern or parents would have concerns in, and very well shared in terms of experiences. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think I really have any questions beyond that. I mean, it was well covered.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chaudhary. So if anybody else on the chat has questions, you can definitely email them to us. We will be sharing our email and other details in the chat, and of course with all the participants. So if there's nothing else, I think this was really fun, Michael. I loved sort of talking about things I haven't thought about for a while now, and it was really interesting to discuss the transformational experiences I had in school and college.
Yeah, and as much as there are like a lot of differences, I think it's also interesting to see the similarities, and yeah, I'm curious to know more.
All right, so stay tuned. We'll definitely be coming up with more of these, and yeah, see you all next time.
Thank you.